Hey yo YouTube, Origami here, welcome back to the channel, and today we're back with another deck profile. The tier list currently remains the same, so we're back with a more interesting list, and this is the Hyperspatial Control list. Now we've not seen too many control lists higher up in the tier list because they're a little bit more complicated to play. This particular one has been placed in tier 2, but I think that's more an aggregation of its potential more than anything else. Now first, I'll go through the list and then I'll explain it at the end. Here we go. First up, we play 4 of the Prince Avaraldo Cavalier of Thunder, a familiar face for hyperspatial decks or any spell heavy decks in fact. When this enters the battle zone, reveal the top 3 cards of your deck, add all spells from among them to your hand, a simple solid pick for spell heavy decks that play light. Next up, we play 4 Jenny Darts, one of the most important pieces of the control element in this deck. You can choose for your opponent to discard either the highest cost card or the lowest cost card in their hand. Really situational in terms of what to pick, but if you understand the deck that your opponent is playing, you can really simply dismantle their entire strategy with just this card. For example, Bolshario is 9 mana and is usually their highest cost card in their hand. Next up, we play 2 of this Rose Castle. Each of your opponent's creatures in the battle zone get minus 1000 power. An interesting one, some rush control, but more importantly, you have quite a few cards in the deck that target certain power or less. Giving minus 1000 to all your opponent's creatures sometimes gives you a whole new landscape to the battlefield. Not effective at all against certain decks, but so you have to exercise your own discretion. Next up, we play 4 of this Comet Charger. Destroy one of your opponent's creatures that has blocker and power 6000 or less, just like I said. Charger. So this is super cheap blocker removal and also some form of ramp. So because this deck doesn't play nature, I've definitely on occasion used this card purely for the charger effect to ramp. And you know, against decks without blockers, there's no use for it anyways. Next up, 2 copies of Phantom Lion's Flame. Shield trigger, destroy one of your opponent's creatures that has power 2000 or less, or put one of your opponent's cross gear into their graveyard. It's simple anti-rush, shield trigger, and also an option for cross gear removal. Next up, we play 2 of this Evolution Burst Gabra Hand. The effect is choose one of the following. Your opponent destroys one of their creatures or your opponent discards a card from their hand at random. Now this card actually has double evolution burst, but there are no evolution creatures in this deck to proc the effect. It's still a simple, efficient removal without targeting as well, which is useful for cards such as Untouchable and Heavy Death Metal. The discard effect sometimes when used alongside the Jenny Darts can be really stifling or suffocating for your opponent. And then we play 4 of this Bolshario Elemental Dragon Knight. Blocker can't attack players. When this enters the battle zone, you may search your deck for a light or fire spell, reveal one of them, then add it to your hand, then shuffle your deck. Useful blocker to mitigate some rush, and is a dragon, which is significant for one of the psychic creatures we'll talk about later. It's a good search for the spells you need, especially the Hyperspatial Host for the on-curve plays. Then we go into the Hyperspatial Host 2 times Shiny Hole and 3 times Dravita Hole. Now these are the standard Hyperspatial Holes. Shiny lets you tap one of your opponent's creatures and Dravita lets you return 1 spell costing 3 or less from your graveyard to your hand. A total of 6 light Hyperspatial Holes because one of the key psychic creatures that you want to summon is this card, which I will talk about later. And in general, Dravita is preferred together with Jenny Darts is a menace. It is a control deck, so sometimes you do want to use Shiny Hole to destroy some of your opponent's creatures, but Dravita Hole generally provides more value. Next up, we're looking at 3 times the Hyperspatial Emperor Hole. Now it looks like one of the normal holes, but it's not because it's 5 mana, but the effect is slightly different. One of your opponent's creatures get minus 2000 power until the end of the turn, and put a Psychic Darkness creature that costs 9 or less from your Hyperspatial zone into your battle zone. So strictly Darkness creatures, and you can't do that 5 or less any number of creatures kind of thing. It provides some control with the minus 2000 power, and your psychic targets are Rumble as well as the Diabolos Zeta. We play 4 Terrapit. Simple, elegant removal, shield trigger, nothing more you need to say here. And then we play 2 Hell Scraper, usually regarded as anti-rush removal, shield trigger as well, 2 is a good number. I think 4 copies would probably be too clunky. And lastly, we play 4 of the Impact of Heavenly Violence, the premium removal shield trigger. Shieldify one of your opponent's creatures or destroy one of your opponent's creatures that has 6000 or less. And if you have an Angel Command and Dragon, choose both. So this is good for mana fixing as well, but mainly premium removal as a shield trigger. So that's it for the main deck. Into the Hyperspatial zone, we have one of the untouchable temporal hero. Truly untouchable, many decks play at least one copy because you can't target it, so it's a very good finisher to survive shield triggers as well. We play one of the John Temporal Explorer, potentially anti-rush, but it's just a good 3 cost to play alongside untouchable. I wonder if it's better to play with that water blocker Martini. I think in terms of personal preference, I might just make that switch. But according to the list, this is the creature they choose to play. Next up, one of the signature cards of this deck, even though it's not one of the more important ones. We play one of Cheuxvelt, Temporal Demonic Element. No effect other than its Awaken effect, which requires you to have 2 or more Angel/Demon commands that cost 6 or more. The Awakened effect is whenever one of your opponent's creatures enter the battle zone. If you have 5 or less shields, shieldify the top card of your deck. Whenever your opponent casts a spell, break one of your opponent's shields at random. Double breaker. So this is very difficult to awaken, but such a menace when you're already ahead to cement that lead. As tempting as it may be, I would really advise against summoning it before having the awaken conditions already on board, because otherwise it's just a 4.5k body. Next up, we play 2 of Chakra, Temporal Thunder Dragon, blocker, can't attack creatures, Holy Field Awaken. And its awaken effect is each of your creatures that has blocker gets ignore any effects that will prevent you from attacking your opponent. Triple breaker, and it has release as well. We play 2 because this is usually the first psychic you want to bring out. It seems like it doesn't do much, but the thing is, it's really easy to flip. It's a blocker and has release, so it's a constant board presence that you can build on. A very good value creature to slap on your board. Next up, we play 1 Dravita, Temporal Pressure Elemental. Strong creature with a strong effect. Whenever your opponent casts a spell, you may tap one of your opponent's creatures. Whenever it wins the battle, untap it. At the start of your turn, if you have 2 or more Flame, Command, or Light or Fire dragons in the battle zone, awaken it. So your targets for this are Bolshario and Chakra. Awaken effect, triple breaker, your opponent can't cast spells, can attack untapped creatures, and release. So slightly difficult to awaken, but very strong control creature to have on your board, disabling spells, being able to attack untapped creatures, and with release it makes it a little bit more sticky. So a very good creature to have if you can awaken it. Next up, we play 1 Rumble Temporal Sage. Effect is Slayer. At the start of your turn, look at the bottom 3 cards of your deck and choose one. If it's the card that has the same name as the bottom card of your deck, shuffle your deck and awaken it. Awaken effect, whenever this creature would battle, destroy your opponent's creatures instead. Seems like an enhanced Slayer effect actually. Triple breaker, release. So it's a really solid demon command. Relatively easy to awaken, decent effect, usually good value, and mainly I would say is a demon command target for Cheuxvelt. And the last psychic creature in this deck, we play 1 of Zeta, the Temporal Suppressor. The effect is Annihilating Soul Recall for your opponent puts 1 of their creatures or cards in their hand to the bottom of your deck. A confusing effect but a devastating one. Essentially sends the cards from either person's graveyard to the deck, and the effect sort of procs for every 4 cards returned. Double breaker. At the end of your turn, if 3 of your opponent's creatures left the battle zone this turn, awaken it. It's pretty much a really difficult awaken effect, especially if you've been trying to control the board well. Awaken effect, each of your opponent's creatures get minus 5000 power and each of your other creatures get plus 5000 power. Quattro breaker and with release as well. So crazy control if you actually pull it off, but it's a really complicated creature to use. I tend to prefer using Rumble unless necessary. Definitely the more powerful creature, but personally I don't use it well enough. So that's it. And like I said, this deck is placed in tier 2, but to me the tier 2 is more an aggregation of its potential, like I said. And what I mean by that is, it's a strange looking list as most control decks are, but the reality is, if you pilot it well, it's a tier 1 deck, and if you don't know how to play it, it's a bottom tier deck. So I think tier 2 is the power level they expect from it when played by the average player, and I don't mean this in a condescending way. I myself can't pilot this deck perfectly. I think by piloting it well, I mean that you have to fully understand not just your deck, but your opponent's deck as well to be able to efficiently counter them. and I can do that for certain decks like Bolshario, Kiriko, but I can't do that for half of the decks out there which I've never played before. And this is why it's so hard to play it well. I think in the hands of someone who has an understanding of all the decks in the meta, it will be tier 1, but in the hands of an average player like me, I would agree that it is tier 2. And yeah, that's that. Essentially, the point of the deck is to be able to counter what your opponent does, which is what control means, right? Either by discard, destruction, and trying to do it more efficiently while slowly building your board presence and make it so that they can do nothing with their deck, which is really hard to do. So I hope you enjoyed this deck profile. If you like this video, do help me drop a like on it to let me know, and I'll keep making more videos like this one. If you're new here, consider subscribing to the channel to stay up to date with more Duel Masters plays and mobile gaming content. Forget about the notification bell, just subscribing would mean a lot to me. And alright, enough yep. I'm not going to be doing the commentary over the gameplay because I think it seems like it doesn't make that much of a difference to you guys, the viewers, but it really slows down the whole editing process to push the videos out. So I'll revert back to just showing the gameplay. Stay tuned for that. Stay safe. Bye bye.
Feeling sorry for the things that might make you mad, but I'm back. Who's back? You ain't even sorry. All you do is make people around you damn worried. I know it's so corny. Now I know where I stand. Don't even have a plan.
이렇게 teasing yeah. 내 자유로운 soul leave me be please 문제가 돈이라면 I'll be filthy rich But 걱정 따윈 없지 나를 rich 내밀어 따위는 너 언제나 보이는 건 no no 속도로 내야 돼 pedal to the metal yeah. I don't really care just move out of my way Reaching for the stars, always on the right road 사실 어떤 길이라도 그게 상관없지 Finna make it work 늦더라도 고른 삶은 마치 롤렛 당치까지 rolling Put on down, give them all, give them 100 I got a lot on my mind 아직은 나 힘이 들어도 I'm grinding yeah, yeah 나는 나이 싫지 않아 목소리 내야 해 목소리 내야 돼 Gotta get the view 여유롭게 달려 더 빛나지 당연 내 삶은 shine like a diamond 괜히 해서 뭐해 걱정 I got no worries no I got no worries no I got no worries no I'm shining like a diamond shining like a diamond yeah. I got no worries 걱정 따윈 없지 no 대기권에 나를 맡겨 태양이 너무 가까워 나에게 들은 burning 나는 방을 닫혀 담비가 내릴 때까지 wow.